and past president of NAGT and a member of the NGSS ESS working group. Happy to welcome you to this afternoon's webinar. Go ahead and get started. This webinar is being recorded. Want to make sure everybody realizes that. So Mitchell will hit the record button. And today's webinar is entitled Soil Biology, Chemistry, and Physics. Oh my. Presenters today will be Brianna Wyatt, Jen DeBruyn, Owen Duckworth, and David Lindboe. And they are going to be presenting a wonderful webinar for us. After the webinar, we'll have a few minutes for discussion and Q&A, and then there will be a post-webinar survey link that we'll share with you. Upcoming webinars for our webinar group on March 11th, we'll have a webinar that will be presented by 4 different PBS stations from around the nation entitled Inspiring All Geoscience Learners Nationwide with PBS. So please join us for that. Registration information will be going out to you soon, probably on Monday for that webinar. And if you've missed any of our webinars and you want to catch up, you've got a long weekend coming. So be a great opportunity to catch up on a couple of those. On the AGI YouTube channel, you'll find a special playlist of our webinars. Please visit that playlist. As always with our webinars, we invite you to use the chat box to type in your questions, but also your ideas and your thoughts. So we want to be able to share more than just questions as we're going through the webinar. So please come up about ways that you maybe have implemented something or thought about something in a classroom with students or thought about working with teachers on a particular topic. Please do drop those into the chat box as well. We're really happy to hear that. Have that be more of a discussion box than it is just a question submission box. So please drop things in there. Happy to have those. And I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, hand over sharing to the SSA team there. So go ahead and grab share screen. And we will get started here.
All right, folks. So my name is Dave Lindboe. I am the director of the Soil and Plant Science Division with USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service. I'm going to be moderating our discussion today. I'm glad you all could join us to learn more about soils. And we will get started immediately. I believe we've got a poll at first just to see what your knowledge is of soils. So I think, Mitchell, if you could show the poll. And all we're asking is just rate your knowledge. Are you a soil expert? Do you have some knowledge of soils, or are you a newbie in soils? We're going to let this go for maybe a minute or so, just give you a chance to enter in that information. And we want you to think about soils maybe in a new way. For those of you that are newbies, it's not just dirt. There's a lot more to it. And I think the presenters today will definitely be able to show you how important soils are to life. And it looks like our poll is kind of slowing down. We've got 52 out of 57. So I'm going to end the poll at this point, and I think Mitchell can do that. And it looks like we've got about 65% of you saying that you've got some knowledge of soils. So that's great. For the newbies, 31%. I really hope we can excite you about soils. So to start off, we have Dr. Brianna Wyatt, who is an assistant professor with the Soil and Crop Sciences Department at Texas A&M in College Station. She specializes in soil physics and hydrology with a research program that is trying to look at applications of meteorology, soil moisture, physics data to look at how soils influence hydrology and soil health. Dr. Wyatt has been a member of the SSA K-12 committee since 2018 with a strong desire to increase youth interest and participation in earth sciences, especially among women and minorities. So with that, Dr. Wyatt, please take over.
Thank you, Dave. That was a great introduction. Can you guys hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
All right, great. So like Dave said, my name is Brianna Wyatt. I'm an assistant professor and I study soil physics and hydrology. And usually the first question that I get when I tell somebody that I study soil physics is, what does that mean? I've had more than one person ask me if I throw dirt in the air and see where it lands. But no, that is not what I do. So soil physics is the study of heat, water, and gas flow into, through, and out of the soil. And as Dave mentioned, my primary focus is on water flow in soil. And a lot of the time, soil physics is considered to be a sister discipline to hydrology. You guys probably heard Dave say that I study soil physics and hydrology. Well, that's usually how the terms are stated. So how is soil related to hydrology? If you look at the water cycle diagram on the right-hand side of this figure, what you may not notice is that soil regulates nearly every component of our planet's water cycle. So when rain falls, it falls on the soil, and that water can either infiltrate into the soil and then continue moving downward through the soil, or it might run off of the surface of the soil into surface water bodies like streams and rivers, maybe a lake. But that water that's held in the soil can continue moving downward and it might become groundwater, or it might be utilized by plants. So at some point, a plant may access that water and then transpire it back up into the atmosphere. Or if there's water just sitting on the land surface, it may be evaporated back up into the atmosphere. And eventually that water vapor in the atmosphere becomes a cloud and the cycle starts all over again. But on Earth, soil regulates all water movement. One of the most important principles in the field of soil physics is soil texture. And soil texture is just the amount of sand, silt, and clay that are in each different soil type. So the diagram on the right shows particle diameter sizes for each of these different types of soil particles. So sand particles are the largest, and they have a diameter that ranges from 0.05 to 2 millimeters. Silt particles are sort of intermediate and have a diameter ranging from 0.002 millimeters to 0.05 millimeters. And then finally, clay particles are the smallest of all soil particles, and they are smaller than 0.002 millimeters in diameter. So I imagine that maybe some of you aren't familiar with millimeters. So just for reference, a single sheet of copy paper has a thickness of 1/10 of 1 millimeter. So a soil particle that has a diameter the same as the thickness of a sheet of paper would still be considered a sand particle. So these silt and clay particles are very, very small. And the ratio of sand to silt to clay in a soil determines the water holding capacity of a soil, as well as the permeability of a soil, or its ability to transmit water. So you guys probably can imagine that a sandy soil will have a relatively low water holding capacity, but will transmit water quickly. And both of those statements are the opposite if you think of a clay, which will store a lot of water, but won't readily transmit that water quickly. When we discuss soil texture, we can break soil textures into 12 different soil textural classes, and those are shown in the soil textural triangle here on the right. And we use this textural triangle to convert percentages of sand, silt, and clay into these 12 soil textural classes. So for example, say we have a soil that is 32% sand, 35% clay, and 33% silt. Well, based on the point where each of those lines intersects, we can say that that soil falls into the category of clay loam. So we have a clay loam soil. The difficulty with this is that sometimes you don't know the percentages of sand, silt, and clay in your soil. So for example, if you're working out in the field and you need to know the soil textural class, you don't necessarily have those percentages. So to handle this, the NRCS developed a method of estimating soil texture using your hands, and this method is called texture by feel. And I'm going to go through this activity, which you can do with students in the classroom. The only materials that you'll need are a soil sample, some water, and a flow chart that was developed by the NRCS. This flow chart is shown here. Try to minimize that bar. No, that's not working. But you start at the top of this flow chart and using the prompts and answering the questions that are presented in this flow chart, you can determine which of the 12 soil textural classes your soil sample falls into. So this video is just a short example of someone going through the entire flow chart. So I'm going to play this and I'm just going to talk over it as it's going. Start from the beginning. So to begin, you start with a soil sample and some water. You put some soil in your hand and then wet it. You make sure that you break down all the aggregates, make sure you don't add too much water, and you knead the soil until it feels like a putty. The second step is, can you form the soil into a ball? Either you can form the soil into a ball or you can't. If you can't, then that soil is considered to be a sand. If it is able to form a ball, then we have to keep going to see what the soil texture is. The next step is to create what's called a soil ribbon. And you do this by squeezing that soil ball between your index finger and your thumb, and then allowing that ribbon to break under its own weight. So your ball will either be able to form a ribbon or it won't. And if you see on the right-hand side, that soil cannot form a ribbon, and therefore we know it must be a loamy sand. The fourth step is to measure the length of the ribbon that's created when you do this. So if the ribbon is less than 2.5 centimeters, then that's going to be considered a loam soil. If the ribbon is between 2.5 and 5 centimeters, you're going to have some type of clay loam. And if the ribbon is greater than 5 centimeters, you're going to have some type of clay. And you can see here the approximate lengths of those pieces as they're falling into the bowl beneath. So you can get a really good representation of what this is supposed to look like when you do it. Now, the final step is to take a small subsample of your soil, put it in your palm and wet it excessively, and then rub it with your finger. The goal is to see how this soil feels. Is it gritty, like sugar or sand, or is it smooth, like flour? Or is it somewhere in between? So if your ribbon was less than 2.5 centimeters and your soil feels gritty, then you have a sandy loam. If it feels very smooth, then you have a silt loam. And if it's somewhere in between, then you have a loam soil. If your ribbon was between 2.5 and 5 centimeters and the soil sample feels very gritty, it's considered a sandy clay loam. And if it feels very smooth, it's a silty clay loam. If it's somewhere in the middle, it's considered a clay loam. Finally, if your soil ribbon is greater than 5 centimeters, if the soil also feels very gritty, then you have a sandy clay. If it feels very smooth, you have a silty clay. And if it's somewhere in the middle, you have a true clay soil. This is the end of the video. And this is the end of my presentation as well. So I'm going to go ahead and exit out so that the next presenter can join in. But this is just one example of a very simple hands-on demonstration that can introduce your students to soil physical concepts.
All right, thank you, Brianna. Now, we do have a couple questions that have come in. We don't have a lot of time to hit all of those questions, but one that I'm going to ask you, and you may have to actually find out, or you may know it immediately. What is the percent of water in soil as compared to the amount of free water, like in a lake or the ocean? It's a great question. And Brianna, do you have that, or can you find that one out for Henri Paul?
Yeah, sure. I'll look it up and answer in the chat.
Okay, that's great. So for time purposes, we're going to move right on. Our next speaker is Dr. Owen Duckworth to talk about soil chemistry. Owen is a professor in the Department of Crop and Soil Sciences at North Carolina State University in Raleigh. He received his BS in chemistry and geology from the College of William and Mary, a master's in environmental science and engineering from University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and a PhD in applied science and engineering from Harvard. He is a soil biogeochemist who investigates transport, transformation, and bioavailability of nutrients and contaminants in soil and water. So with that, Owen, let's learn about chemistry and soils.
It's great to be here today. I hope everyone can hear me all right. See some nodding, so that's always good. I'm going to talk more about the chemical perspective and sort of what things are made of as opposed to the physics perspective and how water and energy move through soils. So when I look at soils, I see not just this beautiful profile that you could see from digging down in your yard if you were in the right place. I see a multi-scaled, incredibly complicated system. So if I were to blow up a little chunk of this, what I would see is a bunch of different particles floating around, little pieces of minerals and little pieces of stuff that's the residues of plants. We call it organic matter, as well as water and air. And in this example, about 25% of the soil has water in it, which might be an answer to that question that came up earlier. So free water, I guess, would be 100% water. And in this soil, which is variable, it's about 25%, I would guess. About 45% would be mineral particles, and about 25% would be air. And then there would be some organics in there. Again, these are the remains of plants and things that grew on the soil. And that's a neat scale to look at things. That's kind of the micro scale. If you blew it up with a microscope, that's what you'd see. But I'm a chemist, and I like to think about atoms. So if I think about what the soil is really made of, it's mostly made of oxygen, actually. So about 53% of it is the same element we breathe in all the time. And then there are more things you might think of as being traditionally associated with minerals. Silicon and aluminum are the major components, little iron, and then a few other things. And what's interesting is they pack together into all these neat regular patterns to make these different crystals. And that's the identity of all these different particles that we find in them. And that's what makes a soil in the eyes of a chemist. So why should we have the eyes of a chemist? So as it turns out, soil chemistry is really important for a lot of different things in the world. So that organic matter, that's stuff that happens when plants die and drop leaves or their roots decay or whatever, that organic matter that's made, how much is stabilized in the soil is very much related to the chemistry of that soil. And how much stays in that soil is very important for the interplay of greenhouse gases that come off of soils. So it's important for climate purposes and understanding that. We've had a lot of pollution in different places depending on the situations. So you could have places where there have been spills of gasoline or of metals or of industrial pollution. And understanding how that pollution moves through soils is important to protecting people, water supplies, animals. So mitigating pollution is an important aspect of soil chemistry. we do have waste to deal with too. So this picture down here in the center of the screen is a hog lagoon in North Carolina. People need things like food and other resources, and doing that causes waste products to happen. And much of that waste product is generally just spread across the land and allowed to decay or be purified by the soil. So we have to understand how that waste behaves in soil to manage it properly. And then two more I'm going to talk a little bit more specifically about are how soils provide food and basic nutrition to humanity, and also how they help to provide purified water, clean water resources for people. So just as a quick primer here, I can't get through talking about how important soil chemistry is without talking about how many different elements are important to life. And I can't get through any talk without putting up periodic table. It's one of the faults of chemists. So as it turns out, when we think about what's needed for plants or for animals to live, there are a lot of different elements. We think about things like carbon and nitrogen, the things that are in sugar and protein and carbohydrates, sort of the macronutrients that we think about for nutrition. But it turns out we need a whole slew of different elements for different reasons. Some of them are used in enzymes. Some of them are used to help handle oxygen when it gets in your body. Some of them are just used to sort of regulate the salinity of your blood. All those elements, except for carbon and oxygen, which are predominantly atmospheric gases when they come into plants, are taken up by the plant through soil. So nearly all the elements we need for life are taken up by plants through soil. And ignoring the marine part of the food chain, where we're talking about fish and other things, essentially the whole food chain is based on these land plants. So even if you're eating meat, the meat is the animal ate the plant that you're eating. So the base of the food chain, the base of the nutrition, comes from what these plants take up from the soil. Perhaps equally important is soil's role in purifying water resources. So we just had an excellent discussion on the physics of water moving through soils. And I don't claim to be an expert on that, but I do like to think about what happens to the chemistry of the water when it moves through soils. So if you have that rain cloud and it rains down, if it lands on the ground and it runs off, it's essentially going to run over whatever's there. If it's a parking lot, you could have oil, you could have metals from tires or brake pads or things like that in it. It could be quite polluted. If it runs down into the soil and infiltrates, it's going to move through the soil. And as it moves through the soil, that soil acts like a filter. And that filter takes pollution out of the soil. It takes it out of the water if it was in the water to begin with. And that can move either to a stream, so it could go through the water and end up discharging into a surface water, or it could go to the groundwater. And groundwater is very important. Although many people in cities don't think about groundwater, over 4 billion people rely on groundwater across the globe for their domestic water and their drinking water supplies. So here's a cool demo where we can think about that. What better way to visualize how soil acts as a filter than with Kool-Aid? So what I did here in this demo, which is not original, and you can find some more details on the website, I went out to my yard and I dug up some soil, and I got a funnel and some filter paper. You could use a coffee filter. There's more on how to do this. And I got some purple Kool-Aid and I got some red Kool-Aid. And the question really here is, what happens if I run this Kool-Aid through this like a filter, in the same way that if you ran water through a filter in a refrigerator pitcher? So here's what happens. So to the right of each of these cups, you can see the Kool-Aid in all its original full-strength glory. The purple stuff is almost black in how much light it holds. Certainly almost looks to be a dark gray. And the red stuff is a unsettling bright orange color. If you pass this through soil fairly quickly, you get a great reduction in this because it filters out some of the color. And what's the color? Well, it's mainly blue dye number 1, food coloring, which is this stuff up here, and red dye number 40, also shown over here. These compounds have been chosen to be relatively, at least, non-toxic to people. I won't get into that debate, but I will say is that they look a lot like a lot of other organic compounds that potentially could be toxic to people. So this is an example of how soil could filter out things that are potentially in, could be in water. That could be a problem for people. So I had a lot of fun doing this demo. I thought it was really cool. I thought it was fairly dramatic. If you want, you can go to the Soils for Teachers website and learn more about this. You can see this dynamic young narrator and scientist, Dave Linbo here, doing this demo for himself. And you can also learn about another demo I find to be a really effective one that shows that soil has a charge. So soil particles have charge on them, and that's part of the reason they work so well as a filter. And here you can see a way where you can make soil stick to a battery, but only one pole of the battery because it's got a specific charge. And I'll let you read all about that on the website. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing and pass it along.
All right, thank you, Owen. And while we're going to the next presenter, we'll have you answer a question. So does the soil chemistry typically reflect the parent material composition, and what causes it to vary away from that?
So soils form from parent material by a process called weathering. And weathering is a function of several different factors: climate, time, organisms, topography, whether the soil is accumulating there or whether it's being washed off. And the other thing is the parent material. So you can't change too much from what you have there to begin with, but you do have these processes going on that tend to change the rocks that were originally there into something else. And those are the factors that really control that.
All right. So again, soil changes from the parent material. And I think part of the reason it does change is what our next speaker is going to be talking about, which is soil biology. So our next speaker is Jennifer De Bruyn. She's an associate professor in the Department of Biosystem Engineering and Soil Science at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, Tennessee. She received her bachelor's degree in biology from Queen's University in Kingston, Canada, and a PhD in ecology and evolutionary biology from the University of Tennessee. She's an environmental microbiologist investigating decomposition, biodegradation in agricultural and natural systems. So with that, Jennifer, let's pull the soil physics and the soil chemistry together to talk about soil biology.
All right, thanks, Dave. Can you see the slides as a full screen, or are you looking at presenter view?
We're actually looking at presenter view right now.
I always get that wrong. Let me try and fix that.
Yeah, you're not the only one, and my guess is a lot of the folks here who have been learning all about
all right,
Zoom.
Is that one better?
And that this looks good now. Thank you.
Right. You think I'd have this figured out by now. All right. Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here today and to talk to you a little bit about soil biology, a subject that's near and dear for me. So as we've hopefully impressed on you, soils are much more than just dirt, much more than just substrate to build our houses and roads on. And I would like to talk about the fact that soils are alive. When we look at soils under the microscope, like in the picture down in this lower panel here, we can see all kinds of evidence of life. So in this picture, you can see soil minerals as these sort of dark patches, and we see soil pores, which are the spaces between. But inside those soil pores, we see all kinds of these little fluorescently labeled microbes swimming around in there. Now, the idea that soils are alive is not a new idea. It's not that revolutionary. In fact, Charles Kellogg, who's a famous soil scientist, was already writing in 1938 about soil life. He said that essentially all life depends on the soil. There can be no life without soil and no soil without life. They've evolved together. In other words, life above ground depends on life below ground. So I'd like to kick us off with a little quiz about how many or how much microbes we get in soil. So here's a test question for you. In 1 hectare of soil, which is about 2.5 acres, thinking about topsoil, so maybe about 6 inches deep, the mass of soil microbes, or the biomass, is approximately equivalent to 1 sheep, 1 cow, 1 African elephant, or 3 African elephants. And I think we have this set up as a poll question. Yes, thank you. So go ahead and put your best guess, educated guess in there.
Okay, we're about at the halfway mark. We're getting there. So give it a couple more seconds for folks. Only 77% voted, so a few may not. There we go. Last
Take
few
a guess,
people
you've
getting
got
their
nothing to
numbers in.
lose.
We're not taking track of what your guess is.
This is not graded.
Always what students want to know. All right. So I think you can see the answers, Jen. So go ahead and let
So
folks
most
know.
of you thought, well, it was pretty close between 1 African elephant and 3 African elephants. You guys have the right idea, though. There is a lot, and the right answer is actually about closer to 3 African elephants. So 1 hectare of soil in those top 6 inches, we can find about 15 tons of microorganisms. So that's about the same weight as 20 cows or 3 African elephants. And that's because soil is one of the most complex habitats on Earth, and so it can support this huge number of microbes. So when we look at the organisms that make their life in soil, we can see 3 key characteristics. One is that they're mostly small. In this graphic, I've organized groups by size on the x-axis down at the bottom here. And you can see that most of the things we're finding in high abundances are in the 1 to 100 micron range, so microscopic. Most soil life is microbial, and that's probably why not too many people think of it on a regular basis. Soil life is also numerous. So on the y-axis here, I've put the approximate abundance that you might find these organisms in topsoil per gram of soil. So a gram of soil would be about a teaspoon of soil. And we can see for some organisms like protists and nematodes that we might find hundreds or thousands of them in a teaspoon. For single cell bacteria and archaea, we find millions or even billions per teaspoon of soil. Finally, these organisms are diverse. Not only are they morphologically diverse, you can see all the different life forms and patterns in these pictures here, but they're also diverse in terms of their metabolism or how they make a living in soil. Some are photosynthetic like plants, and some are heterotrophic like animals. Many of the bacteria and archaea have organisms that we just don't see in higher, they have metabolisms that we don't see in higher organisms, like lithotrophy, the ability to use inorganic compounds for energy. So a high amount of diversity, both in terms of genetic diversity, morphological diversity, and metabolic diversity. So what are some important things that these soil organisms do? Well, since soils are living, I like to think about them like a living system, kind of like the human body. So we can look at some of the services that soils provide and notice that a lot of them are biologically driven. They're processes that are carried out by soil biota. And I like to think of them in terms of their analogy, say, in a human body. So for example, decomposition or breaking down of organic matter and retrieving nutrients, that's kind of like the digestive system. Stability and structure, or the ability to build up aggregates and build soil and give it strength. Well, that's kind of like our skeletal system. Moisture regulation, so the ability to regulate how well water is being held in the soil. I like to think of that kind of like our circulatory system. Microbes are also instrumental in biodegradation of pollutants and pesticides in the soil. So to me, that kind of is like our liver for detox. Biodiversity and pathogen dynamics, so the ability of a diverse soil community to fight off invasion by potential pathogens. That sounds a lot like an immune system. And symbiotic relationships with plants. So we think like nitrogen fixers in legumes, these sort of important partnerships that microbes make with other organisms. That's kind of like their social network. So I wanted to focus a little bit more on decomposition, as this is one of the most important functions that soil microbes do. So just as a reminder, organisms that eat dead plants and animals or detritus are called decomposers. And they really are a critical part of all food webs, but particularly the soil food web. They make space by cleaning up nutrients, or make space by cleaning up dead things. They release nutrients in the process. They're kind of like the biological incinerators, taking old plant matter and turning it into resources for new life. And they're important in mixing organic matter into soil and play key roles in actually soil formation and soil stability. So how can we look at decomposition in the classroom? Well, one kind of fun activity that I think is good for students is the Soil Your Undies challenge. And I thought rather than me explaining it, we'll see if this video will work.
Who doesn't like playing in the dirt?
Let me make sure the sound is working. Okay.
Who doesn't like playing in the dirt? The Soil Conservation Council of Canada does, and we're digging in for National Soil Conservation Week. Anyone can take part. All you need is a new pair of white 100% cotton underwear, a shovel, a marker flag, and a patch of soil to bury your undies. First, dig a narrow trench and bury the underwear in the top 15 centimeters of soil. Leave the waistband showing and mark the place with a flag so you can find it again. Leave the underwear buried for about 2 months. Dig it up carefully and wash it in a bucket of water to remove the soil. If there's not much left of the underwear, right on! You have good biological activity. Bacteria, worms, and other critters that live in healthy soils. Biological activity is one indication of healthy soil. Healthy soils support sustainable food production, enhanced biodiversity, and cleaner air and water for present and future generations. So dig in and share your experiences with us and your social networks using hashtag #SoilYourUndies. It's time to soil your undies in the name of soil conservation.
All right, so that is a pretty straightforward experiment that you can do with your students to show them in a very tangible form how decomposers in the soil are working. You can set up an experiment where you can test an impacted versus a more natural site and compare the decomposition of these two sites and talk about how faster decomposition is indicative of this biological activity that we depend on soils for. I also think this activity is a great launching point for other discussions. So for example, you could talk about biodegradation and you could think about what would be the difference between cotton or a synthetic underwear, natural fibers versus synthetic. You can talk about temperature controls on biochemical processes and think about the seasonal differences. What would be faster, decomposition in the summer versus the winter? And in general, it's a good way to talk about ways that we can manage and improve soil health. So what are some ways that we can feed those soil decomposers so they keep doing the things that they love to do? Another thing you can do with this activity is there's actually, NRCS has a map set up where you can post pictures of your experiment. So people from around the country have posted their Soil Your Undies results. And so that's a fun way to sort of interact with other groups or see what other groups are up to. You'll notice if you go to this website that there are multiple school groups that have done this around the country. So definitely something that works well with students. If you want to include more soil biology in your classroom, we also have other resources on the Soils for Teachers site. T for Science is a very similar in concept to the Soil Your Undies activity. Instead of using underwear, you use tea bags, but the idea is very similar. There's also activities for looking at soils under a microscope or discovering soil fauna using Berlese funnels. So be sure to check those out if you're interested in soil biology. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jen. We've got a few questions have come in, and I should point out the questions that are coming in, we may not get all of them answered today. We're going to try, but if we don't get them answered, we will answer them and get the information back out to you. So one of the first ones here was, what are the effects of wildfires on soil biology, and how long does it take for a soil to recover after being disturbed by something like wildfire?
That's a great question. So wildfire is going to do a couple things. One, it's going to heat, obviously. It's going to raise the temperature. That's probably going to affect a lot of soil biota that are used to kind of the middle temperatures, the mesophilic temperatures. So that's probably not going to be so good. But the other thing it does is it's providing a lot of new carbon too. You have all this essentially biochar or charcoal type compounds that are coming into the soil. So that could also maybe have a stimulatory effect as new food sources for organisms. So I think the effects of wildfire are pretty complex on soil biota. The question about how long it takes to recover is a really good one, and I don't have an answer for that. I think it might depend on the system.
So in some cases, soils do recover pretty rapidly from natural events. But I do want to give you another one that I think can be an answer pretty quickly. Looks like decomposition gets greater with depth when you were looking at those soil Urundies. Is that the case, or was that just the effect of the underwear?
In the little cartoon, I think that's what we were looking at, the little animation thing. Yeah, that's not exactly that's not representative. In fact, we would expect to see greater decomposition closer to the surface, where we would have more oxygen. We'd have greater diffusion of oxygen in from the atmosphere. And anytime decomposers can use oxygen, they're going to be at their most efficient, and we're going to get fastest degradation.
All right. Well, thank you for that, Jen. We're going to move on to talk a little bit about some of the institutional resources that are available from the Soil Science Society of America. And to do that is Susan Chapman. Susan is the Director of Member Services for the SSSA. She's been an integral member of the K-12 committee since it started in 2005. So we appreciate her work, and she's got great information on what we can provide for you. So Susan, take it away.
All right, thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Yes, I'm Susan Chapman. I'm the Director of Member Services for the societies, and I work with the committee on, quick scroll through on all of the resources that we've been creating. So just real briefly, your three presenters and your moderator today are all part of our SSSA K-12 committee for various amounts of times. The committee has been very active. But real quickly, the Soil Science Society of America is about 5,000 members, students, both undergrad and grad students, and our soil scientists in academia, doing research and teaching, government, and in industry, and in consulting. We've been around since 1936, well, the organization has, and have focused on just all different aspects of soil science. So I wanted to walk through some of the resources that the committee has developed for K-12 educators and students. And some of you may have seen us at NSTA. I think we've been going to the NSTA annual meeting for probably about 10, 12 years. And you all know Missy Holzer. She's also our main connection through NSTA and has been with us for many, many years as well. So some of the things that we have developed are a couple of websites, Soil for Kids and Soils for Teachers. I'm going to take you to Soils for Teachers in a minute. And we've also developed two books, Soil, Get the Inside Scoop, which is really focused around the grades 3 to 5 level. And then No Soil, No Life, which was developed for the high school and introductory soils classes at the college level. couple of other things that the committee has done is we have developed several teachers guides. One for the grades like 6 to 8, it's a unit. We've also put together PowerPoints for our Soil Get the Inside Scoop book that focus, take you through like all of the different pages, and there's PowerPoints and information on each page and some ways you can use it in the classroom. This is an example of a webinar that the committee has put together, and we also did one a couple years ago on foundations for soils. And I think as Ada said, this is the global premiere for our new Soils for Teachers website. So we're really excited to share this site. We've had it, we've had a Soils for Teachers site for about 12 or 14 years. It's gone through several iterations, and we've actually just launched this new look and easier navigation this week. So you're seeing it for the first time. This will take you through a lot of different areas, some basics, soils by subject, which you heard some of them today, around the world. And we actually, the committee wrote a state soil booklet for every state in the US, and we're working on a couple of other ones as well for the territories. So you can click on any one. I'm partial to Wisconsin because that's where we're based. And you'll see a PDF that then they all follow the same template, some history, what the state soil is, some interesting facts about it, and how it was formed. So you can use that for your classroom. We've got an activity that goes along with that. Some other categories, soil and people, and then our lessons and activities site. First of all, this is what I was referencing, the teacher's guide for Soil Get the Inside Scoop. You can find that there. We also, in 2015, it was the International Year of Soils. And the whole international community rallied around it. We developed 12 videos and a lot of different activities that you can do, and you can find more information here. You can submit lesson plans. And then we developed a search. We had one for a long time, a big long list of activities that we tried to categorize. And through a collaborative grant with NRCS, we developed, one of the things we developed was this database search. Let's see, it should take me there. Nope, I'm gonna go this way.
Right, Susan, we're still seeing the website right now, just the soilsforteachers.org.
Oh, you're not seeing me walk through everything?
No, we're not. Sorry, or at least I'm not.
All right, hang on. So sorry. All right. Let me do a screen share again. Can you see the search now?
Now we're there. Yes, thank you.
Okay. Oh, thank you for telling me. Again, so I got to that through this lessons and activities. You go down to the search and you can search for keywords. If you're doing an outreach activity, if you'd like to see materials that the committee has developed, or you'd like to search by grade level, topic, type of activity. If you want to search by specific standards, you can do that. And then you just click resources and you'll get a whole list of activities. We've also created a binder where if you want to like collect a bunch of different activities, put them into a binder, you just need to log in and create a quick account. And then if you want to add more, and it'll always be then saved for you to reference. And then we've got, I hope this works now. The other thing that we are launching is the No Soil, No Life Educator's Guide. And that's for our other book. And that was another activity we've just developed from the grant that we received. And can you see this? Somebody
Yes, we
tell me.
can.
Okay,
Yes.
great. So this is actually, as you can see, hosted on the circ.carleton.edu site as well. And It breaks down the No Soil, No Life books into their various chapters. Gives you a summary, learning objectives, the essential questions, big ideas. There's a PowerPoint we're developing for each chapter as well. Some of them are done. We're wrapping up just a couple of the other ones. And other activities that are correlated to that chapter as well. So we're really excited because we've just launched that one in the last couple of weeks as well. And finally, I just wanted to give you a quick look at another piece that we hope to be able to introduce next time NSTA is in person. One of the other things that we created for teachers for classrooms is this is a poster that's sort of the basics of soils. It's two-sided. One side is for the K5, K8, and you can flip to the other side and it's a little bit more advanced. So it just all depends on where your classroom is in terms of soils understanding. So we will be working on ways to distribute that, whether it's in person or some other way very soon. So those are the resources that we are very pleased to bring you and hope you'll be able to use in your classroom.
All right, so thank you for that. I've gotten our notice that we're coming to the end of our time with you guys. I did want to mention a little bit about careers, just to let you know, there are a lot of careers in soil science. You heard from three individuals today talking from physics to chemistry to biology. You might want to note that two of our presenters, actually their degrees did not include soils in what they studied originally, but they are teaching about soils. And I think it's important for folks to realize soils touches everything. So there are a lot of careers out there. Many of our students work with engineering firms. Many work with either federal government or state governments with health departments dealing with land use and septic systems, which is one of the things I had worked with. Also with folks doing land use planning, so planning departments. So again, it's varied. We even have soil scientists that are working on Martian soils. Granted, they're not there yet, but they may be sometime. But we have folks that have worked with the rovers. So soil scientists can work in many different areas. And I'd say that if you're interested in finding out more, talk to some of the local universities and ask them about careers in soils. With that, do we have time for a couple questions?
I think we can take one or maybe two short ones.
Okay, well, since Jen did get two, I'm going to go back up and ask Brianna, what are the forces that affect or affect how soils influence or regulate movement of water?
So, sorry, say that again?
So what are the forces that affect how soils influence or regulate the movement of water?
Yeah, so the movement of water in soils is driven by a number of things, including, things like temperature, atmospheric conditions being really, really predominant. But there are also the soil physical properties that I talked about today that really are predominant in how water moves through different types of soil. So for example, a sandy soil, water will move really very quickly through a sandy soil. But maybe with a clay soil, that water will just sort of stay where it is and maybe even pond on the surface of that soil. So the soil texture itself is one of the driving factors when it comes to water movement in soils themselves.
Right. Well, thank you for that. And Owen, a great question here is, are there any chemical reactions in soil that can actually make pollution worse?
Yes. So there's two really things that come to mind for me. Sometimes when chemicals break down, what they break down into is actually more toxic than what you had to begin with. So that can be an issue. And another one is sometimes moving water can actually interact with the rocks and dissolve elements that are in the rocks. Some of those elements can be toxic. So for example, there are issues with things like arsenic and chromium in certain areas that just dissolve naturally out of rocks and soil into groundwater, and thus can be a problem in people's drinking water resources.
All right, and I think that probably takes us to the end. So we're going to go back for our host to wrap us up.
Thanks very much for a wonderful webinar. Thanks to all the panelists. You did a wonderful job, and thank you for answering so many of the questions. That was really nice. I know there are a couple others that were asked, and maybe we can get those to you and you can respond to those by email. To our participants today, thanks for joining us and staying till the end. We do have a post-webinar survey. This information is very, very important to us. So if somebody could drop that link into the chat box, I would very much appreciate that. And if you're interested in a certificate of webinar participation, the only way you can get that is by responding to the post-webinar survey. So please do take care of that. This webinar series is brought to you by 3 organizations. The first of those 3 organizations is the National Association of Geoscience Teachers. NAGT runs a full webinar series. We invite you to drop into the webpage and visit the webinar series, but also to become a member and join us in all the fun at NAGT. And Missy, do you want to unmute and talk about Nesta, please?
Hi, thank you. So Nesta is the K-12 Earth Science organization. We welcome you to join us. We have monthly e-news. We have our webinar series, or excuse me, not a webinar series, quarterly journal. And we participate in outreach wherever we can with our regional directors and also at the national level.
Thanks, Missy. And then the American Geosciences Institute, and I think you're still there.
I am. Thanks very much, all. And thanks for being here today. And yes, thank you for a wonderful webinar. The American Geosciences Institute is a federation of professional societies, all things geoscience. And we have many different kinds of education and outreach programs. I'll direct you most importantly to our Earth Science Week initiative. And also, when you look at that website, you'll see a lot of links to other resources that teachers can use and make use of over time. So thank you all for being here, and thank you very much for being part of our series.
Just a quick reminder, March 11th, we will have a webinar presented by 4 different PBS stations coming to us from across the country. I think that should be a really intriguing look at some of their programming. Please visit our AGI YouTube channels where you can catch all of our webinars in the archived format. And then I'll leave this slide up as we close out the webinar. If you want to reach any of the 3 of us, the NGSS ESS working group, that is myself, Aida Awad, Ed Roback from AGI, and Missy Holzer from Nesta. Happy to have you all here. Thanks to Mitchell for being in the background and running the tech for us. Spotless job as always. And I wish everyone a great afternoon. Thanks a lot.